I again looked at the coin I had gotten from Starwalker and thought about again how for the price I paid, I could have gotten an entire capital class star vessel. Shaking my hand as I flipped the coin and let it activate, ripping a hole in reality but a few yards in front of me, I knew that I had most likely still come out ahead on the deal. Just as the portal had finished forming, I began to dash, my feet never touching the ground, instead staying about a foot above it as I ran through the portal and felt the shiver of its transit. Coming out on the other side and before the portal's energy had completely dissipated, everything around me began to shift and shake, as if you were watching a recording that had been paused, the image flickering back and forth between moments. The inkless step was one of the most feared, least understood, and most speculated on abilities within the realms, among those that knew of it, of course. It allowed me to move and act completely outside the flow of and notice of time and reality for most practical purposes. And so far as I knew, I was only one of 5 to know the technique. As I continued my run, I saw the place I had come to visit, a large dome made up of large reed-like plants grown into the shape of a grand greenhouse from all appearances, making for the only arched doorway, and weaving between the few monks that seemed to live here and tend the orchard within. I could see and feel the layers upon layers of magical and other obfuscation and concealment worked into the building and the wider grounds. Now I knew I had gotten a deal on the coin, and it was now clear to me why no one else seemed to know or would admit to knowing where this location was. There were great forces behind this place and keeping it as unknown and unfindable as possible. And with the bounty it held, I wondered if it was enough, as I ran in and launched into the air. Stopping when I reached a high central point above the trees, I spun and cast out my weights and the wires attached to them into differing sections of the grove and orchard beneath me, each of them snaking into the trees and securing the prizes of my efforts. As I pulled the wires back and stowed the fruits that they carried into a pouch that would perfectly preserve them until they were needed, I landed and began to run back towards the now bright arched opening, watching it grow bigger as I rapidly approached, until it suddenly shrank in size and a burst of pain flowed across my face. As my broken nose reset and mended itself, I looked at a man, short even for a human, floating a few feet above the ground, between me and the exit. He wore robes and raiment that I knew well, and it explained how he just struck me as hard as he had. But I guess I was mistaken. There were at least 6 who knew the step, apparently. He spoke, seeming to sense my thoughts. Did you think a prize such as the one you were trying to abscond with would not be under the protection of one at least capable of reacting to such incursions? Before I answered, he continued, Not that it matters. You now have 2 possible futures from this point, thief. Either you impress me, and I allow you to leave, or you become compost for the grove. I would recommend the first line of action if I were you. He was already centered and allowing both his powers as a fist and as a student of the blue flame to flow like waves on a beach over his body, calm, rhythmic, and serene. Looking at him, I knew he was at best a quarter to maybe a third as powerful as I was. So I did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I relaxed. and without the tight hold my passive energies, they came bursting forth, flowing out bright and strong to those with the ability to see it, easily dwarfing the smaller man's display. Despite this, he just sighed and narrowed his eyes as he spoke. Insulting me is not a good first move, Analar. Perhaps this shall impress on you the nature of your situation. Then he called forth his full might, the secrets and powers that the way of the fist reveal and make available to one who masters the lessons required. His physical form only grew a slight bit, a subtle mark of mastery that was rare among the already rare disciples of the fist, and his aura and energies did not explode from him as mine had, or was the norm, instead flowing around in a deep, dense-looking cocoon of flowing power that now dwarfed mine as I had dwarfed his. My thoughts were then disturbed by my own power and aura responding to the display of this stranger. I felt a power and a strength I had not allowed myself to know again in this age return like an old lover, and it was bliss. That is until my arm shattered in 9 places from my aura, and the regeneration that it maintained began spinning into full overdrive with the torrent of power I was now allowing to flow out of me. As more bones began to crack and break, I had to pull my focus entirely in on controlling this before I destroyed myself with my own power. I could feel it flowing like a great flare of a star, and understood if I did not contain it, I would be burned out as surely as if it were the flames of an angry star. For a long, timeless moment, I pulled and shaped my power, how it was flowing, where it released. With a resounding pop, I felt all my wires split into multiples, and the bursts of raw power now focused on the striking weights, along which the lines connected and flowed. The wires moved around me in patterns woven in and out of vision and sense, in now smooth motions controlled fully by me once more. As my ability to focus on something outside of myself and the torment I had been suffering returned, I noted that the stranger's own power was still perhaps 3/4 of mine, now that I had tapped my full strength for the first time since before the wars. He merely smiled and shrank the minor bit back to normal, having released his own power. "That'll do," was all he said before turning to walk back to where he had been when I had entered. Just before he returned to the normal flow of time, he spoke to me one last line, a warning. "If you ever attempt to defile the sanctity of this place again, you will serve as fertilizer for the grove for the following 9 ages of the realms. Do not doubt my sincerity on this. Tag alone." With that, he returned, shifting and phased into the normal time stream, and I, properly warned, left with all possible haste, as I knew this not to be an idle threat or bluff. Welcome to the library, my perceptive patrons. I am the Recorder, and today we are looking at one of the most potent and powerful forms of healing that exists within the realms, the Fruit of Celestial Bounty. Now, there is not a whole lot known about this beyond the fruit itself and its effects, and the fruit is only known to those with mighty large pockets to be able to afford it. The fruit in its various forms, is known to most learned healers and those of such matters, as it represents one of, if not the most potent healing plant within the realms, capable of reversing even death in the proper use. Most of what is supposed about the tree that would bear these miraculous fruits has been discovered via time magics and other forms of scrying, attempts to regress the fruit into an earlier state. The fruit comes from a tree with odd, fractal-like branches, an organism that would seem to require regular infusion of large amounts of celestial energies to survive, thrive, and then bear their fruit. This does make sense with the name of the fruit and the enormous powers of healing contained within it. The fruit itself is able to mend nearly any wound and able to restore even the most grievous of injury with as little as a slice from a fruit, with the consumption of an entire fruit nearly ensuring not only a near instant restoration, but a potent healing factor for some time afterwards. The potency of the healing, as well as the duration of the lingering effects, are very much affected by the state of the fruit and how much of it is consumed. As illustrated before, there is a difference between consuming a small slice and a full fruit. But there is also a difference between a fresh, wet fruit and one that has been dried for storage and long-term keeping. The dried samples are logically less potent, but only just, with the lingering effects being far less potent, but still vastly beyond what is normally possible. This difference between wet and dry is also suspected to affect the most valued of the products of the fruit, its seeds. These seeds contain the full might of the plant's healing properties and are capable of bringing back the recently dead to full life and health. There is apparently no malady or disease, curse or hex that a seed cannot seem to break, and the long-lost limbs of a person can be seen to return in moments after ingesting a seed. The reason that it is only suspected that wet seeds are even more potent is there is no record of them ever appearing, leading many to think that only a wet seed can be used to attempt to grow one of these most valuable of crops. In that case, it would make sense that the tenders and growers of these wonderful delights would prevent wet seeds from ever going outside their purview, while the restorative properties of the meat of the fruit itself would be far most sought out of the products, with seeds practically being unknown outside the highest circles. It is the juice of the fruit that people have had the most likelihood to encounter. The juice comes in two forms, pulped or not, and in either form will restore someone as if they had spent an entire day at rest and recovery, relieving fatigue, restoring magical energies, and uses of abilities typically restricted by time or the movement of the stars in their use. The main difference is that juice with pulp has a far longer duration of effect if an entire flask is consumed at once. A flask contains 3 drafts of the juice. Doing this refreshes the use of any powers activated or cast during its duration, while the far more common non-pulp juice will have this effect for less than a minute. Pulp juice can have its effects last for several minutes. It should be mentioned that while the various produce of the fruit are available in the wider markets for those that know where and how to look, as well as having the funds or other means to procure them once found, no matter the time or effort that has been paid to try to locate the source or producers of the fruit, nothing but dead drops and overdue storage contracts has ever been found. Whomever is facilitating the marketing of these most valuable of medical supplies, they have so far been able to remain undiscovered for centuries, despite the rigorous and numerous efforts made to locate the source of these fruit. This implies that the source is under the protection of very powerful patrons indeed. If the high priests of the V's themselves seem as lost to the origins of the fruit as the rest of us, it must be a powerful patron indeed. And with this brief look at one of the most unique and potent snacks of the realms at its end, I want to thank you, as always, for your time and your interest, my perceptive patrons. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, until you make your way back to the library once more, I have been the recorder, and by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. I moved with speed and rapidity that my new form allowed, exiting the grove and streaking into the sky in a blur of power. I came back down to enter into the base we had chosen for our endeavor, and moved with haste along its mostly empty halls before finding myself outside the door to the conference room that Percival would be waiting for me within. Before ending the step and returning to time's flow and grip, I had the presence of mind to release my power and return to my normal form. As soon as I ended the step, I realized the folly of not having done so much earlier. Maintaining the step while using and expelling all that power had a cost. One that only made itself known when time once again was a reality for me. I stumbled forward into the door, the striking weights on my wrist acting as a door knocker. It slid to the side with no sound, and I half walked, half stumbled into the room, still getting my feet back from under me. Upon seeing Percival and the guest he was speaking to, I went from half to full stumble and collapsed bodily at the edge of the table they were sitting at. I could feel the aches and pains from my little stunt raging at my body for the mere act of existing. Looks like you could use this. Percival's guest spoke as he handed me a small flask, and I happily took a small draught of the drink contained within, and found it to be the very juice of the fruit that was the cause of my current state. Feeling and tasting the sweet power of the juice that was in the flask, I felt my body's complaints dull, then vanish, and found myself able to move and stand normally. Moving to hand back the flask, I found that the guest was gone, with only the flask as proof of his presence. I looked at Percival. Do I even want to know how you know him? I was unsure if I actually wanted the answer to this one. We're old friends. He said he wanted to visit and catch up. Percival's tone made it clear that he was no more fooled by the reasoning than I would be. But when dealing with those of upper management, you took things as they were given and analyzed the whys and the hows later.